Welcome back to the channel. I want to show you guys some of the new Resolve 19.1 updates. First things first, we now have a new option with any folder that you drag from your hard drive. So not a bin that you create in here by saying new bin, but if you drag one from Finder into the directory here, you can now right click and choose automatically resync media files. So if I go ahead and drag a file into this directory and drop it in, it will now sense that file has been added, and now we have that new file right there. You can also choose resync the bin, but as soon as automatically resync media files is on, it deselects the resync. So any directories that you don't have automatic on, you can say resync. But with this one, it's kind of like a watch folder at that point. Check, and then the resync media files is grayed out, which is nice if you're gathering up footage or add to a directory, it'll automatically populate in here. Next up, under Edit Options, we now have a automatically create tracks on edit. So as you can see here, we have 2 audio tracks on the timeline. And if I have a clip that has more audio tracks, see if you guys have experienced this when you go to drag a clip down, this one actually has quite a few channels. And if we have that selected, it's now only going to make the 2 channels that came with that track. Whereas if we turn this off and say automatically create tracks on edit, we go down and I drag this down now, you can see I went ahead and added all the rest of those audio tracks. And these ones are empty, and a lot of times I end up swiping and choosing all the empty tracks unless I know I have some content in there. So that's a nice feature that they added. Now if you have an in and an out selected and you're going to copy and paste, let's say we copy this file here and we hit paste, it actually pastes where your playhead is and not where your in and out marker is. So be aware of that. So it went ahead and moved to the end, but if our playhead was here and we hit paste, it'll actually overwrite that clip. So if you do choose an in and out, you have to insert it into that section. Whereas before, it would just paste wherever your in and out marker was. Another new feature underneath your fixed playhead, actually keep mine where the timeline scrolls underneath. So as I hit play, the playhead marker scrolls, but you can go under here and choose fixed playhead, and now the timeline scrolls underneath kind of like the cut page does. And then you can actually move where the playhead sits to a certain range, and then it'll just scroll underneath that. And that's also another new feature for those of you that might like that. Another thing you can do is trim your channels within the inspector. So if we go over to File here, you can see we have 2 channels. If we click on channel 1, we now have a level, and you can slide that and it gives you a little indicator. So if you had independent channels that weren't the same volume, you can actually adjust those independently now. And there's a little reset as long as it's selected. And then if you right click, you can say display individual audio channels, and if I adjust channel 2 here, it actually shows up on the waveform visually as well in the timeline. If you have an uneven audio source, it's definitely beneficial. Another great thing is, if you remember in another video under index, when we have extra tracks, we'd have to go into this index here and you can click and drag. Now you don't have to do that anymore. You can do that right from the timeline. So if you needed to solo, you can click and drag. If you need to mute, if you need to lock your tracks. So this is a new click and drag feature that they added. Certainly a welcome update. I know I'll be using it all the time now that it's available. So you can get rid of your auto track selectors in one swoop. Another feature that's studio only is the Ducker tool. So if we go under audio here, you have these voice isolation, dialogue leveler. Under Ducker, previously you could only use one source. Now you can designate which channel of audio you want to listen to. So now if we had audio on channel 3 and we also had audio on channel 4, it would listen to both those channels and duck the audio accordingly. So that's another great update. Another thing under Fusion Effects, these can now be rendered into cache. So any of your Fusion effects would just have to render out, or you'd have to render in place. Now you can drag and drop them, and when you add that effect, as long as your smart render is on, it will render it just like it would cache any other effect. So that's under playback, render cache smart, and then under your cogwheel, under your master settings, you have this little checkbox now underneath optimized media and render cache, automatically cache Fusion effects in user mode. And now when you add those kind of effects, it'll go ahead and start caching the clip to give you the real-time playback. On the color page, under this 3-dot menu, we now have a track node changes using a color. If you select a color, if you're working with somebody else, you could have a whole giant node tree, and if they made an adjustment on any node, you can see that that graph turned lime, letting it know that that has been changed since the last save. Another feature in the curves is the 3-dot menu here. We have, under the qualifier, a default qualifier mode. So normally it's HSL, but you can change it to the RGB, the Lumens, or the 3D picker, which is a nice feature as well. All right, another new feature, you can duplicate a track and disable. So let's say this first track here is one that was a source that we wanted to keep intact. You can actually right click over here now and choose duplicate track, and it'll go ahead and rename it and make another copy. And then you could keep this first track if it was source, and you can say disable track. It'll gray out and italicize, and it won't use any resources any longer. Then you have a secondary copy if this is one that you wanted to start editing or run an effect on, and you could always go back to your original audio here. Another new feature is the rearrange the audio tracks over here in the mixer. So if we wanted to move this audio copy to the first position, you can just drag it over now. And if we wanted to move this unused track down, we could just drag it to the right, and that'll rearrange your audio tracks. So that's a nice feature that they added, which is sort of like what most DAWs do. Another feature, if we make a break in the audio here and start to trim, let's say we move this over, and we were going to trim in between these two regions. If you look over the waveform here, you can see waveform on the right will show up as you start dragging, and same thing on the left. So if you're looking for a point in which you're going to overlap your audio and you're trimming, you would know as you drag, you can see where you're about to overlap audio. So it's kind of like a phantom waveform of what's already existing. So that's very handy. New to the export page, we now have under resolution, we have timeline resolution and timeline frame rate instead of like a frame rate with a number or a pixel dimension. That's kind of like a set it and forget it. Most people probably just leave it unless you're delivering other aspects or frame rate. And then on your render, you now can rearrange your renders by dragging. So as you can see, I have render 2 and render 1. If I wanted to render number 2 second, I could just drag it down and reorder it. So now you can have complete control of your queue, and you can always hit render all or just choose one and hit render 1. And then speaking of renders, if we go over to our media pool and go to our timelines, if you had several timelines set up here, you could highlight them all, right click, choose timelines, and then you can say add to render queue using, and then choose one of your presets from your delivery page. So here I have a few, and if you don't know how to do delivery presets or presets on the render page, under this 3-dot menu, after you set up all your parameters, you can choose that and say save as new preset and give it a name, or you can create an additional video output. You can clear presets. So this is like your preset manager. So any of the ones that you have over here are available as your quick presets for the timeline export. So if you have different versions like a vertical or a horizontal, you can just grab them, they'll be named, and you can export them, and you don't have to add them to the queue. It's almost like the quick export right here, but this is only going to do whatever is on your timeline, whereas this one you could bang out a bunch of versions and export them all without doing any other heavy lifting. And that's pretty much all the things that I found so far that I thought were super useful in the new 19.1 update. All right, thanks for watching as always, and I'll see you guys on the next video.